All right, welcome everyone to another amazing show on the One Moment Podcast. I'm your boy and your co-host Kevo, and I got a very amazing friend of mine on the show today. And it's interesting because we met, I think, 2 years ago,
Uh-huh.
and I call him Jay. His name is Jar Michael, and we both do very similar work. And I'm looking forward to talking to him and getting new perceptions and getting what he's passionate about, getting what he's advocating for and has been for the last decade plus. So, with that being said, I don't want to take up too much of his time, Mr. Jar Michael, or shall I say Jay.
Jay, it's fine with me, man.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well, very well. Thank you for having me, man. It's been a long time coming. And you and I've had this conversation, I think, when we met 2 years ago. He was like, hey man, come on to the podcast. But this is finally an opportunity for us to sit down and chop it up. But it's always a good time when you and get together. So I'm looking forward to this a whole bunch.
Absolutely, 100%, man. Yeah, I mean, 2 years ago when I showed up at Wilmington, or not Wilmington, but Atlantic Beach.
Uh-huh.
When I met you and the rest of the team, I already knew a couple of them, so I appreciate you even agreeing to come on here and let's be part of the solution and not the problem
Right.
to the mental health and substance use crisis that's going on, not just in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
but around the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, don't get me started on what's happening around the world. I think most of this boils down to stigma that has been um, infused with propaganda from the war on drugs, and that's just not in the United States. That's globally.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
when you think about how we talk about addiction and recovery, oftentimes for the majority of folks, is looked at through that propaganda lens. And so we don't get to actually have conversations around healing because we spend so much time debunking myths.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I think you're right. The war on drugs has been, and I get the concept of it, but
Mhm.
and I'm not saying I disagree with the concept by any means,
Right.
but if we look at its actual practice of it, right,
Hmm.
and how it's been implemented across the board is criminalization. You
Right.
know, criminalizing people for using cocaine, for using marijuana, for using, heroin, fentanyl, things like that. And let's take it a step further, right? And it's not just criminalizing people for drug use, but it's ripped apart families.
Hmm.
And for people who don't know the history of the substance use field and some of the drug laws here, this was very interesting for me to read when I was going through school. Cocaine is only illegal because African Americans and minorities got to using it. Rich
Yeah.
white people were using it first and
Yeah.
foremost. And then when the minority people started using it, that's when it became illegal to use.
Yeah.
And so it's ripped apart families, it's put a disproportionate number of uh, African American African Americans and other minorities
Hmm.
in prison and in jails. And now we have children across so many communities being raised without fathers or
Yeah.
mothers.
Absolutely, man. And it's interesting that you can bring those pieces up because I actually wrote a little piece about the war on drugs. And I used to say that the war on drugs was failed policy.
Hmm.
But then I started to get real about it and was like, no, wait, this is exactly what it was designed to do, right? Like the war on drugs was an extension of the transatlantic slave trade. All right.
Mm.
And there's some history that kind of takes place in between those things. But one of the biggest things that drew my attention to this was the 13th Amendment in and of itself outlaw slavery, with the exception of those who've been duly convicted of a crime. And when you are in power, you can decide that anything is a crime.
Absolutely.
So the war on drugs became an extension of that.
Wow. See, I didn't know that part itself. And it's sad because when you think about, for me, and I know that we were just briefly talking about this, when I think about being a part of the solution and not the problem,
Hmm.
I'm taking back to connection, right? And the way I practice clinically is not from the medical model of addiction, so to speak, but it's more from an existential perspective, along with the importance of connections, right? Connections help build community, helps build unity, it helps build um, meaning in our lives,
Hmm.
all of those things. And so when you look at the war on drugs, right, and how it's ripped families and relationships apart,
Hmm.
and then you look at substance use too, let's factor in drug use and substance use, that's already ripping families apart.
Yeah.
Now you have lack of community, lack of meaning, lack of unity, lack of connections. And too often, I think, and what I see too, is that is the most important part of recovery.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny that I've been thinking through this for a while now. But one of the things that really started to click for me was I was working my first job after college was working at a treatment center for high school kids. And to be honest with you, even that concept was wild to me because I didn't know that high school kids went to rehab, right? That there was a space for ages 13 to 17 years old to go and get the help and the support that they needed. And to be honest with you, most of those students that we worked with started using well before 13, right? I'm talking like 10, 11, 12, um, and using some hard stuff, right? And this is not a conversation around hard drugs versus soft drugs, but when you learn that a 13-year-old is shooting heroin, you're like, wait, what happened in their world that this is where they've shown up? And so for me, it was okay. How do we teach these kids how to be kids again? And in a program that lasts 90 to 120 days,
Mm,
the first 60 days, their mind is still clouded,
mhm,
right? And as the adult in the room, you're trying to win their trust by being consistent because they haven't had consistent adults in their lives for the most part, right? I'm generalizing, but for the most part, if you're 13 years old and you found yourself in treatment, something is fallen apart both in your home environment and the community that supports you. And so after a kid shows up at 13, 15, and then 17 years old, it's like, does treatment work or does it not work? And then
mm,
you start digging deeper and you go, wait, treatment does work when it is couched within the full continuum, right? When there's good prevention work happening outside of treatment, when there is warm handoffs to step down services, and when there's solid recovery support beyond that. But how many 15-year-olds do you see in a 12-step meeting in your community? It's very few, right? Are there even age appropriate programs out there for mutual aid? I know of one, and I don't even know how many are actually in the state of North Carolina. And that will be the Seven Challenges program. That's the program that we utilized in the treatment center. But we also exposed our students to 12 step because while it may not be necessarily your peer group at a 12 step community, it is a peer opportunity that you can engage in and find some mentorship. And so that's how we operated. But I kept asking, like, wait, what else needs to be done, right? And I talk often about this. If you've heard me in any other space, you've heard me mention this name, Don Coyus, the founder
mm,
of White Bison and the Wellbriety movement. That indigenous group, they speak about the healing forest, and they speak about, hey, you can treat the tree or you can treat the soil, right? And when you learn to treat the soil and not just look at the tree as the symptom or the issue, but rather a symptom of bad soil, then you can get to the heart of what's actually happening. And a lot of that boils down to social determinants of health, right? Proper education, proper housing, proper food security, um, built environment, right? All these things. When we talk about war on drugs and all these other places, the most resourced and healthy communities don't have more police; they have more resources. And
Mm,
so, when you talk about the over policing of communities and the over surveillance of communities, you don't see that same type of surveillance and policing in affluent neighborhoods because they have the resources to take care of all the other social determinants of health that create less opportunity for criminality.
mm,
And to be honest with you, when we're talking about it on that level, the criminality that we come with, the criminality we talk about, right, quote unquote, is actually people just trying to figure out how to survive day to day in a world that wasn't built for them. And when we talk about the war on drugs, ultimately that's it, right? People just figuring out how to cope with the society and the world that's not meeting their needs.
mm. Man, no, and you said a mouthful. You said a mouthful. It's interesting because I was just, in North Carolina for sure. And since you're from North Carolina, you know exactly what's going on as far as like the substance use field here and
Hmm.
what we struggle with. And I was just talking to a young man. Like the guy was young. He was young,
Yeah.
and he got to smoking that stuff that you can buy over the counter. And literally after he had cleared up some, he had stopped me. I mean, this is like days later, right? He had cleared up from the psychosis, and I literally looked at him and I said, "Let me tell you something." I said, "You bought it because you're young and you want to have fun, this, that, and the third. I don't think you're insane or stupid or anything." I said, "I think you're just young and you want to have fun." And then I took it a step further and I said, "Hey, when's the last time you saw those stores uh, in low income, I mean, in affluent neighborhoods?
Right.
Like, when's the last time?" I said, "I've traveled many places and none of those stores are located in rich white neighborhoods or rich affluent neighborhoods or anything of that sort." I'm like, "But if you look at a lot of your low income areas, you see these stores almost every corner, like, and it's sad, right? It's
Yeah.
sad." And so when you think about the social determinants of health, like the community is a huge part of it, right? It's like a pillar of it. And so we can treat, as that, individual said, we can treat this tree all day
Yeah.
and I'll be fine. The tree's still going to be burnt, half dead, half alive, whatever. But if you want the tree to be vibrant and full of, whatever colors and, whatever type of tree it is,
Hmm.
we need to be able to treat the roots,
Right.
right? And it's all about tackling the roots of the issues,
Hmm.
because if we're not treating that, we're still continuing this cycle of substance use treatment, right? Active use treatment, active use treatment, active use treatment. And then let's look at what active use is. Criminality, right? Whether you want to say substance use is criminal or not, I don't think it is. But you're talking about other things that can come along with it: breaking and enterings, domestic violence, suicidality, homicidality. Yeah, and we can keep going down the list ad
Hmm.
infinitum. And I think you just changed my mind on something too.
Okay. Say more on that.
I used to think for the low income communities we needed more police. But then the way you described it, I'm like, "Oh, it's not police, you're right. It is resources."
Hmm.
I didn't think about it from that perspective until you actually said it.
Well, you have to remember how the entire system is figured out, right? Like take schools for instance. Schools are funded, especially at the public level, by tax dollars. So if you are in a low income area, your tax rates are lower. So
Mm,
there's less money to pour back into the schools in your community. You can go into a Charlotte and they'll build a whole subdivision and put the elementary school right in the middle of it, right? Have you ever noticed that? Or going into like these larger cities like Raleigh and things?
yep.
You don't see that in rural communities. right? The schools are going to be what the schools are going to be. But I was like absolutely blown away when I pulled into a neighborhood and I was like, oh wait, there's an elementary school at the bottom of this hill. Like, but that entire community is surrounding that school, is providing the resources. I'm sure that along with the HOA, there's a really solid PTA, right? Like there's a lot of things happening in that community that promotes pro-social behavior, promotes um, you know, teaching the youth about what's right and wrong. And there's not a whole lot of need for criminality when all of your needs are met.
Mm. It makes me think of where I went to high school at. Little rink-a-dink high school called Aiden Grifton,
Okay.
and
I forget you from Eastern North Carolina.
right, right. And then I when I went out to Texas in January, it was my first time ever, and of course, I went in through a different way than I typically go,
Hmm.
and I went through Dallas. I was on the way to San Antonio, so the way I went in, it carried me straight through Dallas, and so I'm like, "Oh, shoot, there's a temple. I wanted to go see a temple over here in West Dallas or Northwest Dallas," and they got a huge community. I mean, huge community right there that's on this little 4-lane road.
Hmm.
Can't even go but, like, 25 down the road. The high school looked like a ECU college campus,
Oh yeah.
okay? Like, the whole high school was
Yeah.
I mean, it was almost as big as ECU college campus,
Hmm.
right? And so you look at the communities, right? And it is about resources. You're 100% right.
Right.
Aiden Grifton is a little rink-a-dink one building. I mean, you might have a couple of trailers back in the back that's set up, but you don't have the level of resources
Hmm.
in that small community
Yeah.
that you do in many other areas.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so when you have those lack of resources, who suffers the most?
Right.
It's our children, the most important people
Hmm.
ever. It's our job to raise them. It's our job to teach them and educate them and give them the resources they need.
Yeah. And when I was at that treatment center, man, and I was there for 5 years, um, it was one of those things where our job again was teaching kids how to be kids again. But the biggest piece of that was teaching them that, there are consequences for your actions, whether good, bad, or indifferent. And when we say that a consequence is going to fall, we followed up. And once they understood and knew that that was going to be true, they could trust us. And so if they knew they had fallen off the wagon or done something negative, we would we wouldn't chastise them out of hate, but we were like, hey, like there's consequences for your actions. And once they kind of got with that program, especially those that kind of been around for a little bit, it wasn't so much about testing boundaries as much as it was now them learning themselves. Right. Like I remember literally having students be like, yo, like I want to do right, but I also see where I'm self-sabotaging,
Mm,
right? Because they're used to the other shoe following in a way that this can't be this good, right? Like something's gonna happen that I don't deserve X, Y, and Z. And it's like, no, you deserve every great thing that comes your way, but you have to work for it. Nothing's given to you. And in that, even when we're just sitting around the dinner table and having dinner together, right? That was something that was new for a lot of our students, right? To actually sit down and have a designated time for dinner where everybody came together and ate was new for a lot of the students that we worked with. Um, you know, One of the fun things was actually teaching the kids how to cook. They were planning their own menus each week, and they would take turns cooking. If you were cook, you would cook for the day. So you and your roommate typically would plan the breakfast menu, the lunch menu, and the dinner menu, and you'd be the first one up and the last one to go to bed, because you had to make sure that everything was in place. And so that was kind of how we operated some things there. But you could see it in their eyes, like when they're sitting around that dinner table, just having fun, right? Sometimes it was inappropriate fun, but you check that and you move on. But it was just seeing them just again, just being kids. And when I when I saw the anonymous people, a great documentary that came out in 2013, that's where I was introduced to Don Coyes, and this concept of, yeah, treatment is going to do what treatment does, but if the community doesn't support individuals that need the support, then it's all for naught. And so that's when I was like, okay, so how do we make that happen? Like, what does that look like? What does treating the soil actually look like? And for me, it was getting involved in the collegiate recovery work. And I got involved with collegiate recovery, which are essentially, now that I have a few more years under my belt and seen some things, collegiate recovery communities are nothing but RCOs implanted on college campuses, right? They're recovery community organizations that are implanted on college campuses. They don't provide treatment, although there are some CRCs out there that might have an embedded counselor that folks might see, not necessarily for counseling, but more so for like recovery coaching, unless a referral is made to another counselor for some heavy counseling and all of that type of stuff. But most of it was all pro social events, right? Mutual aid meetings, um, study halls, social events, those types of things, and really designed to support the whole student, not just their recovery or their academic piece, but all of it, right? That a student doesn't have to choose between their recovery and their treatment, or their recovery and their education, but they can have both and have in a space that historically was never really meant for students who were in recovery, trying to find recovery, right? You think about a college campus, especially in the last few decades in particular. I mean, I use the analogy of, or the slogan of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. All right, we call college campuses recovery hostile environments for a reason. Um, but I'm at a conference today. There's 400. There's going to be 400 people here this week talking about recovery at the college level, the high school level, as well as alternative peer groups. And what that does is provide those safe spaces and those pro-social opportunities for folks to really kind of figure it out, and figure it out with like-minded people. And so I'm excited to be here. I'm actually out in Denver today. I'm going to be here throughout this week, and it's a great time, right? You really get to be reminded of why you do this work and what we get out of it. And a huge part of that is seeing students be able to graduate, um, that never thought they were going to make it to college, much less get through it. And so that's a huge piece for me. When I was at the treatment center, I'm an ECU graduate through and through. I graduated from ECU in 2010, and then went back and got my master's and graduated in 2015. But I worked at that treatment center in Greenville. So on the weekends when we had downtime, I would take all the students to campus and we would hang out on campus. And they would get to see college students. They would get to experience social events and all these other things that were happening on the college campus that did not include alcohol and drugs, right? I'm talking about Super Bowl parties that you've never seen before, right? Like going to the theater to watch the Super Bowl, and at halftime there's raffles and um, door prizes and all these different things that our students got to participate in. And there's all this free food. And they're like, wait, this is what college is all about. And I'm like, it's a part of it. It's not the only thing of college, but it's a part of it. And they go, man, you know what? I didn't even think I was going to be able to graduate high school, but being in treatment allowed me to get my GED. And now I think I want to go to college. And my first thought was, oh man, that's great. And then I think about all the things that come along with college, and I go, all right, but let's have a conversation about what that might look like, right? Let's have a conversation about why you might not want to join a fraternity in your first semester, right? Not saying that you can't, and not saying that there aren't great fraternities out there, but maybe let's focus on why you're there first, your academics. Let's also figure out how we get you connected to the counseling center when you first arrive too, just so you have some additional support, right? let me tell you that you're gonna have an academic advisor, and they're gonna hand you a schedule, but you have the power to say, hey, I want a different schedule. You have the power to say, hey, maybe I don't need to take a biology lab, chemistry and chemistry lab all in the same first semester. Right? Let me get my feet wet. Let me figure this thing out a little bit. I wish I had somebody to tell me those things when I was first got to college, right? It would have made my life a whole lot easier. But I took the route of choosing pride um, over humility, I guess is the best way to put it. When they handed me that 18 hours and I had college math, um, chemistry lab, biology lab, and I had another tough course that first semester too. I forget what it was, but it was too much. It was too much to handle, and I didn't know that I had the power to say, hey, this is too much all at once. Let me back off of this a little bit and figure out kind of my flow. But once I was able to figure all of that out, after that really bad first semester, I mean, I made dean's list and all kind of stuff towards the end of it all. And I like to tell folks, I maybe didn't start out the best, but when it's all said and done, I graduated. They let me come back to get a master's degree, and then they hired me and let me work there for several years, and now I get to teach. And so I've been able to do a lot of things in my path the collegiate space, but I didn't know any of those things were available to me because I just wasn't exposed to it at that level. And collegiate recovery really does kind of help students figure that stuff out, but do it in a way that is proactive rather than reactive.
Mm, yeah. No, you're right on that one. You know, when I took an ABD, I was working on a doctorate, and I finally took an ABD. I got tired of spending. I think I spent like 30 grand in 2 years. And I said, man, I cannot spend my tires in the mud anymore and go nowhere. So I'm
Yeah.
done. So I started at the program I'm at now, and I love the school. Freaking phenomenal school. But I'm paying out of pocket, right? Like I don't get like I'm done. Like I don't get any loans, grants, or anything. I'm done for.
Yeah.
And so I started at school. Absolutely, I love it. I love the school. It's a dual degree program, and I remember my advisor was like, "Hey, you need to take this class, this class, this class." And I'm like, so I questioned her at first. I'm like, "Well, I can just take one, right? Like one a semester, right?" She's like, "Yeah, but you'll finish quicker." I'm like, "Well, I ain't worried about finishing quicker. I'm just worried about finishing."
Yeah.
And so she was like, "Yeah, well, you can do one." And so I got through the first semester, and second semester rolls around, and I'm trying to get in and register and all of that. And she mentioned, she was like, "Hey, listen, I want you to take this class and this." And so, so I asked her. I said, "Well, if you're going to pay for the other class, like I'll go ahead and sign up for it." Okay, right. And she was like, "Well, I can't pay for it, but if I could, I would." I'm like, "All right then." And so I think she finally got the hint, like, "Hey, I'm gonna do this thing the way I can financially.
Yeah.
Okay, I ain't in no hurry. I don't care if it takes me 12 years. I mean, of course, it's not gonna take me 12 years. It's 13 classes, I think, for the whole program. But like, we do have the right to say, hey, this is I don't want to do
So
this. I can't do this.
so
I
here's
can
the
only."
thing, man. This is where the rubber really meets the road for me, especially for our young people.
Mhm,
The typical or average high school student graduates at 17 or 18 years old. They
mhm.
graduate typically in May or June, and then they go off to college in August, which means that when they showed up to campus for orientation to get their classes, just 3 months prior, they had to raise their hand to go to the bathroom. And now you're telling them that they have to make all the decisions for the rest of their lives in these next 4 years. There's a disconnect there, right?
100%.
So again, for me, not recognizing that I had essentially the keys to this Ferrari in my hand now, and I just freaking got my license 3 months ago. It's like I didn't even know what to ask, much less tell an adult, no, I don't want this schedule. right? And so I think
Right.
that's one of those things when we talk about how do we best support young people in creating spaces in which they can thrive. It's empowering them to know that, hey, when you go off to college, whether you're getting loans or a scholarship is or paying out of pocket altogether, it's up to you to decide how you're going to spend your time.
Hmm.
And you have the power to push back. And I don't want to spend too much time in all of that. I mean, I love this conversation we're having around like what is recovery and how do we make it accessible for everyone. But I guess what we got to this point was the anonymous people exposed me to the idea of collegiate recovery, which I then saw as a pathway for the students that I met at 13 to 17 years old. If they're really serious about their recovery, we can create some lanes down the road that they can get themselves into, that will help sustain that work. And so I've just gotten really passionate about that because what I have found is your college campus is a microcosm of the society around it, and also one of the most resourced communities that you're ever going to find, in a 4 to 5 year period that you're in college, right? I mean, you step onto a college campus, you have your gym, your dorm, your food, your student health, or like the infirmary, hospital, whatever. All of that is on essentially in the 1 block radius, and you pay
Hmm.
one fee and get access to all of it. Right? If that's not universal health care, I don't know what it is. Like, um, there's the wellness component, there's all of that, and it's all at your fingertips, and all you have to do is ask for it. And if we could get the rest of society to get on board and create environments in which people can thrive in that same way, education included, then we'll be very much on our way to creating, what we believe to be the American dream, in all of its glory. Right? I mean, we're 250 years in, and we're still trying to figure this thing out. And sometimes I feel like we're going backwards, but that's neither here nor there. But think about that though, right? If if the college campus is proof of concept for what a true healing force looks like, I think we have it, and we just have to invest in it.
Mm. No, I think you're right. I think because I think it goes back to empowering people, right? Giving them
Hmm.
the keys to the Ferrari, as you said, and making sure that they have the tools that are needed. Now, are they going to screw it up? 100%. But it's still our job to continue to guide
Hmm.
and teach how to drive that Ferrari.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about, I mean, it's got a lot of horsepower behind it just for a little rinky dink car.
Hmm.
And, when you're going from having to raise your hand to get permission to go to the bathroom to now you're expected to know everything relating to adulthood. I mean, really? Like the frontal lobe and the
Right.
brain aren't even fully developed until they're at least mid-20s if you're a
Right.
female, late 20s if you're a male.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? I mean, so let me ask you this then, because I'm curious to know, because you work in the collegiate thing and you deal more on the college level versus the high school level.
Hmm.
How many college campuses are y'all at in North Carolina right now?
So in North Carolina, we have about 30 campuses with a collegiate recovery effort, at minimum. And so we kind of classify it in 3 levels of efforts, communities, and then full-fledged programs. Um, as far as our like UNC system schools, like your Chapel Hills, NC States, ECU, all of those, all of our HBCUs, all of our public HBCUs have a collegiate recovery community, and then, almost all, but maybe two of our 4 year institutions have a collegiate recovery community within the UNC system. And then in total, we have about 30, which per capita is like blowing the rest of the country out of the water. I think
Wow,
the only one that's even close to us is having as many programs, as we have in our state is probably Pennsylvania.
I can see that. I can see
Yeah.
that. They've done a lot of innovation in the last, couple of
They have, and they you can attribute our innovation to a group of students that were attending the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, about 12 years ago now, that advocated for collegiate recovery to happen in our state. And so it went from those two schools essentially to six schools to 10, and then here recently, like I said, almost all of the public institutions in our state. And then slowly but surely, some of our independent schools have been coming on, as well as some community colleges. So we have about 30 programs here in our state. In Pennsylvania, the catalyst there was the Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation.
Mhm.
They invested $1 million into expanding collegiate recovery in the state of Pennsylvania. Just in the Philadelphia metro area. And so they identified a bunch of schools, mostly trade schools and like community colleges, to really build out what they have going on there. Um, Other states that have a similar model to us would be West Virginia, Virginia, um, Virginia, Louisiana, the state of Washington, and Tennessee is starting to come on as well. So there's about 5 or 6 states that have a model that is similar to what we have going on in North Carolina. But North Carolina was one of the first.
Wow. Alright, so you mentioned a lot of public schools
Hmm.
and things like that. Alright, let's take it a step further. How about private or charter schools or anything of that sort?
Yeah.
So
So
we have
in North Carolina specifically, it's just I'm just most intricately aware of kind of what's happening there. You have quite a few, like Elon University
mhm,
has a really strong collegiate recovery program. Um, They also have some grant funding from the state to support their program. Mars Hill University also has a program. Um, Trying to think if I can think of another one right off. Methodist College or University had a program for a short amount of time. I think they might be in the midst of some transition here at the moment, so I'm not fully sure where they are. And then community colleges, you have Fayetteville Tech, Nash Community College, Central Piedmont Community College. Forsyth Tech is now looking at collegiate recovery because they're looking at quite a few workforce development programs at Forsyth Tech. So they're now looking into some collegiate recovery efforts to support their workforce development programming as well.
sweet.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Alright, it might not be your wheelhouse, but it's worth asking,
Okay.
especially for the public. What about our high schools and middle schools? What
Yeah.
about what about that area?
So in North Carolina specifically, we have two recovery high schools, um, and you and so those are Emerald School of Excellence in Charlotte and Wake Monarch Academy in Raleigh. And we have 100 counties, so we have a lot of work to do in that particular regard. But we do have two recovery high schools, and I think both programs will tell you if you can get your student um, to campus each day, then they're welcome. And so, whatever that means in terms of transportation and all of that for you, we could certainly help to kind of figure that out. But that's essentially what we have in North Carolina. One of the cool things is, just as many of our campuses are a part of a larger network of campuses across the nation called the Association of Recovering Higher Education, there's also the Association of Recovery Schools. They're actually hosting this conference along with us. And there are recovery high schools all across the nation, um, primarily in the Texas area, but there's a really strong one here in Denver, Colorado that folks will be touring. Maybe even tonight, I think there's an open house called 5820, I believe it is. But I can, when me and you follow up, I can send you links to a lot of this stuff just so that your listeners can learn more about this great work because, you know, it's cliche, but like the children truly are the future, right? And so if we can't prevent substance use from happening, the least that we can do is create opportunities for folks to find healing as early as possible. In the recovery high schools and alternative peer groups, which are essentially after school programs for adolescents and emerging adults, that they have those outlets and resources as well. And so those are some resources that are out there. And while we only have two recovery high schools in North Carolina, I've identified at least 3 or 4 alternative peer groups across our state. They just don't recognize that they are alternative peer groups by definition. And so we're helping to do some education around that so that folks can connect with their people on the national level and get more resources and more opportunities to learn how to better support um, our adolescents and young and emerging adults.
Wow. I got cold chills on that last part too.
Why is
Uh,
that?
it, Man, because you're talking about things that you're passionate about, and you're talking about areas of critical concern,
Hmm.
trying to bring awareness and trying to build resources and put them together.
Yeah.
Not just in North Carolina, but you're also working on a much more broad level too than
Yeah.
just North Carolina.
Yeah.
And that's really what it's about, right? It's about knowing that, oh, well, we need collegiate recovery in, Edenton, North Carolina. I think
Hmm.
Edenton's a very rural area, right?
Right.
Then you find that there's a group of 5 people down there, 5 students, that they're all about peer led recovery.
Hmm.
Well, you're connecting with them and saying, "Hey, this is what y'all are already doing. Let's work together to achieve the same outcome."
Yeah.
You
Because
see what
the
I'm saying?
reality, yeah, the reality is this, man. I mean, you don't know what you can become or can achieve if you haven't seen it, right? And so a lot of times it's hard for folks to think that their recovery on the college campus is even possible because they've only seen college as one thing, right? They see the large tailgates, they see the stuff that's scrolling on TikTok, or every couple of years there's a new app that just shows all the carnage on college campuses. Like where there used to be Yik Yak and now with something else, and I think it's changed its name yet again another time here. But you get those apps and things, and you see guys like taking the line bikes and jumping over fire pits, right? And all kind of just crazy stuff, like doing what college kids do. But that's only one part of the college experience. And so when you also get to see, oh, there's a group of sober students that get together and they have a clubhouse on campus and they study and they do the fun stuff, but they also are serious about supporting one another, making sure nobody's falling through the cracks. Like that's empowering to see as well, right?
Mm.
One of my favorite stories at ECU, I met a young lady who was on the verge of being expelled because she had a history of DUIs and had a family history of alcoholism. And I mean, one semester after the next, she's finding herself with a DUI or these challenges. And thankfully, she had a caseworker that was willing to work with her and finally said, "Hey, like you're on your last straw. If you don't go check out this program and just see what it's about, you might not make it. Like not just not make it at ECU, like you might not live to see the next semester, right?" Um, and to know that that individual trusted the process when it was only her and another student in our program, and said, "Hey, like if this is gonna keep me out of trouble, I'm gonna figure this out, and I want to see something like this grow." And she started an AA meeting on our campus, and then she went on to graduate, and now she's working in the field. She's
Wow.
a licensed social worker now,
Wow.
and that's one of a million stories that we could probably tell, right? But then also the reality is this is life changing work because I've also seen the stories that it was the collegiate recovery community that went and found a student um, who had a plan of suicidality. And when they weren't responding to emails and text messages, the group went out to go find this person. And that person is still with us, right? Like these are the types of things that happen that we don't always get a chance to talk about. and or document as like the success stories of this work, but know that this stuff actually does happen, and it happens probably far more frequently than you would think, right? That it's just really great work that's happening, and I'm just honored that I get to be a part of it, even if just for a moment.
Mm, wow. Wow. Yeah, that is something that you don't see every day,
Hmm.
right? I mean, there's one thing if you work in a hospital and like I do, and you get to see something like that because I see it, every single day, right? Like I
Yeah.
see, people being brought to the ED for suicidality, and maybe it's their mom, the friend, the brother, the sister, somebody who's bringing them, or maybe they have called the ambulance, or
Hmm.
air team or whatever, but you don't see something like that right there, the peer led, collegiate recovery deal. And if you think about it, like if you need help, who would it be from?
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Hmm.
I mean, I'm not going to reach out to the healthcare system if I need help. I'm going to reach out to somebody I trust.
Right.
And that somebody I trust will be a friend, maybe somebody who I hang out with every day.
Yep.
Wow. That is beautiful, beautiful work. So let me ask you this then, because if you're working on all of this, right, and if
Hmm.
you've done all of that, what's the next step? Like, what is the next, I guess, major goal or major barrier, I guess,
Yeah.
within this realm?
So all the great things I've told you about, right?
Hmm.
Told you there's 30 programs in our state. There's other states that are doing the work that we're doing, and yet and still, less than 3% of all college campuses have a collegiate recovery community.
Wow.
Did you hear me?
Yeah,
Less
less
than
than 3%.
3% of all college campuses have a collegiate recovery community. So we haven't even scratched the surface yet. And so what's next is how do we sustain this great work? How do we get it past a passion project for someone who's just passionate about helping young people like I am? How do we actually make it so that every major institution across our country says that we support students and we support all students, not just the ones that we feel like fit our bubble, right? When we can start having conversations about having legit sober sections in a college, in an SEC college football stadium, right? Not just the the small potatoes programs, that seat 20,000, but we have a whole sober section in the stadium that holds 100,000, right? That there are SEC versus ACC challenges and like sober tailgates um, that are truly about student empowerment and student engagement. Like that's when we feel like we would have reached our pinnacle, right? When lives is truly being saved. And it's not just the, like I said, like passion project for someone, or um, a pet project for a chancellor or whatever. Like that when we talk about student health and we talk about counseling and psychological services, we're also talking about collegiate recovery as a part of the whole wellness package on the college campus.
Mm.
So I don't know if my work will ever be done because, like I said, with 3% of college campuses having a collegiate recovery community and 40% of college students is meeting the criteria for a substance use disorder, yeah, there's a big gap.
It's a huge gap. That's a huge gap.
Hmm. And
So what?
if we're talking about high school students, 3.7 million students are living with a substance use disorder.
How many high schools in the state? Or no, you already answered on the state. How many high schools, to your knowledge, nationally, have a collegiate recovery?
I would have to check, but I'm leaning towards less than 50 for sure.
So what is that? If you had to throw a percentage on it, would it be like
Probably
1%, less
probably
than 1?
1%, maybe. I'm I, I'm gonna ask somebody when I get back downstairs because I'm sure somebody knows. Because like I said, the national organization is here, so I'm sure somebody has that data. Um, but if I know for collegiate recovery it's less than 3%, I would dare say for recovery high schools because they operate kind of on like a charter or like a private school type of situation. I'm sure there's way less, way
Mm,
less. My dream would be that um, there will be like an alternative peer group slash collegiate recovery model that happens on at the high school level, almost like a club, right? That every high school has a sober club um, for young people to have those alternative outlets um, and have some peer coaching and all of those great things with someone as an adult that has a little bit of a clinical background that can help them navigate some of those challenges as well. So that's a dream of mine. I don't know how far or how close or how far we are to seeing that actually happen, but if I ever had some free time, that would be where I would spend some of my energy.
I love it. Now I'm interested in knowing if the university that I'm at, if they have a collegiate recovery,
Which
and I'm
school?
thinking University of Mary in Bismarck, North Dakota.
I don't believe so, but it's never hurts to ask.
Yeah, I'm whenever we get done, I'm gonna call my counselor up yonder and say, "Yo, do we have a collegiate recovery? If not, here's my boy Jay. I need you to contact him. He can get you set up."
Yep. Absolutely. And one of the cool things about this is, and I told you about the recovery efforts, communities, and programs. Those are words that we use colloquially within our space that have never had formalized definitions.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, so there is a formalized definition for a collegiate recovery program. But then we look at communities as kind of like a step down from that, where it's not fully actualized, but it's on its way. And then efforts um, that really didn't have a definition either. It was just kind of like, oh, like they're not a program or community just yet, but we're going to call them an effort. So one of the things I'm proud of is North Carolina was able to actually operationalize those three terms, and I can send you that information as well. But essentially, if you have a champion on your campus that is even interested in building a collegiate recovery initiative, then we identify you as an effort. And then we empower you with the resources to move your effort to a community and ultimately from a community to a program.
I love it.
Yeah. So
I
I'm a
love
real,
it.
as you can tell, I'm passionate about it, but I've been involved in this work. I joined, I learned about collegiate recovery in 2014, and I joined as a student member of of the national organization immediately. And then I helped to start the program at ECU, and we got it off the ground by 2015. And I worked there from 2015 to 2021 as the founding program coordinator at East Carolina University's collegiate recovery community. And now I am the director of the North Carolina Higher Education Consortium, director of programs um, for InCheck at APNC. And all of our work is around both prevention and recovery on our college campuses and infusing that work together so that no students getting left behind, falling through the cracks.
I love it. I love, man, I love the passion. I love the vision. Uh, so let me ask you this then, because if that's the goal, right? If we're less than
Mhm.
3%, right? Not with high school, because I do believe what you're saying is most likely going to be significantly less than 1%.
Yeah.
So if we factor in the 3%, and we need to get to, I mean, significantly jump that number up, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the immediate barriers that your organization, that Collegiate Recovery, needs to overcome? Like, what are some of those barriers that kind of that y'all have been focusing on, or that y'all see that, like, let's say Florida has none? I don't know. I'm just saying, let's imagine Florida didn't have any or whatever.
Right.
What are those barriers like?
The biggest barrier I think is funding. Um, Most of the folks that I know in the role that I was at ECU is grant funded, either fully grant funded or partially grant funded. And so if that grant ever goes away, and as we know, your grant can be here today and gone tomorrow, especially if it's federally funded. Um, there's no staff, then there's no program. And so funding is a huge piece. What I always tell folks is, hey, if you're not sure if your school has a program, call, ask student affairs if they have a program. Ask the admissions department if you have a program. And if you do, take a little bit of your money that you're donating back to your university, your alma mater, and put $100 towards collegiate recovery. That'll buy some pizzas for an event, and that's what draws numbers. On the college campus, if you can provide food, you got students, right? And so, you know, every little bit helps. But I think funding is probably one of the biggest barriers. Beyond funding, and this is what leads beyond funding, the next thing is just the stigma piece, right? A lot of our decision makers on college campuses would like to believe that if a student is in college, then there's no need for them to have to be in recovery, or that you know everybody drinks on the weekends, but everybody's also graduating, right? And I guess two things can be true at the same time, but you definitely have students in recovery on your college campus. Your idea of what someone looks like in recovery might be a little bit shifted or jaded, right? Because you have this idea that recovery and active addiction are the same, and they're not. And so when you think about someone being in recovery, you think about the person that's standing on the side of the road asking for a handout, and that may or may not be true. But at the exact same time, there's so much more depth to that entire process and that whole situation. And so someone that is in recovery may actually very much still be homeless, but they have just enough fortitude and resilience to still be pursuing their education, because that is a path out of their situation. And so it takes a little bit of curiosity and compassion to look beyond your stereotypes and actually get to the root of the issue.
Mm, wow. Yeah, that's a man. That is a lot, and at the same time, I think it does speak to the courage that and commitment that it takes. Also think it speaks to the passion, the compassion, yeah, passion and compassion,
Right?
the empathy that is needed, because, as you said early on, and various times throughout, the young people is what's holding the next generation
Yeah.
coming before you and I. That's the most important. We've had our chance.
Yeah.
We've had our chance to go through, life and all of that good stuff. And I'm not saying we don't still have a life. No, no, I'm not saying that by any means.
Right.
Like you're absolutely right on that. 100%.
Definitely.
And so, listen, I would love to keep you for another 2 hours, because I mean, man, I've got 1,000 questions on the back of my mind, but, uh, this is folks, listen, this is only the first episode, okay? I love this guy. What he talks about is very intriguing, it's interesting, and it's important, and it's critical. And so, with that being said, let's start wrapping up, if that's okay with you.
Yeah. No. Absolutely.
Okay. If people want to reach out to you, maybe as a mentor, maybe reach out to you as far as like getting some resources on how to go about starting collegiate recovery, whether it's at a high school or maybe at a college campus,
Mhm.
maybe get you to speak on their podcast or do a TEDx talk or what have you, whatever. What is, how can I contact you?
JoeMichaelHarris.com is my personal website. You can also reach me at info@JoeMichaelHarris.com. And then I'm on all socials. And so if you search Joe Michael Harris, I mean, there's only so many Joe Michael Harrises out in the world. But if you search me, you'll find all of the work that I've been doing, both with Engage Recovery as well as the work I've been doing with Khalid Recovery across the nation. And so I'll be sure to send Kevin all of my handles and all of that good stuff, so that we can certainly connect, because this is again what I'm passionate about. But what I'm most passionate about is helping communities understand these conversations in a way that makes sense. Because we can get folks to treatment. It's harder. It feels now like it might be harder. At the same time, it feels both harder than ever and easier than ever to get folks into treatment. But if you don't sustain the communities that surround these individuals that are in need of support, then it's all for naught. And so that's where Engage Recovery really steps up to say, hey, let me help you to understand what the actual process of addiction looks like, and why 30 days in treatment is not going to solve the issue. Right. And so how do we help keep folks motivated and engaged and empowered? Not just the individual that's seeking treatment, but also their loved ones that are supporting them through the process and afterwards as well. So that's what I do. It's what I'm passionate about and what I continue to do each and every day. So
I love it. I love it. What is one thing you hope somebody takes away from this?
that there is hope, that there is hope, there is support. Um, Sometimes that support can come in a 100-piece puzzle that you have to kind of put it all together, but allow someone to help you to navigate that process, especially those that have been through it on their own or before. Um, there are folks out there that have seen the light and can know how to get you there. And so um, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for that help.
All right. And most important question that you're going to be asked today, unless it's your wife or kids or anything, okay? Um, what is your call to action for people?
That's a great question. Show up, but don't just show up to say that you showed up. Show up with solution. Um, it's easy to ask questions. It's easy to critique things, um, but at least have an idea of how you would do something differently, right? It's actually how I ended up in this work. Um, you know, the first Khalid Recovery Conference I showed up to, um, there weren't very many men in the room who looked like me. In fact, there was a point in time where there were only three black men in the entire nation doing the work that I do, from a professional level. And that sucked, right? Because I felt like I had very few people to lean on that understood my perspective of what was happening in this work. But I did not turn my back and say, well, obviously this space isn't for me. I opened doors and open windows and ensure that by the time that I was ready to move on to the next thing, that there were more and more people who looked like me in these roles. And so I became a board member. I volunteer every chance that I get. I show up, and I mean, like I said, I attended my first Khalid Recovery Conference in 2016. I looked around the room, didn't see very people who looked like me. So the next year I presented. Right? It's like, if they're not gonna, if maybe the salute, maybe the reason there's no one here that looks like me is because no one is submitting proposals to present. So I submitted a proposal to present, and so the very next conference I was the presenter. By the time I arrived for the third conference, I was on the board. So yeah, I mean, you just keep showing up until something changes. And I served on that board for 6 years.
Wow. Wow. That is powerful.
Yeah.
Well, folks, you heard it best. There's hope and there's resources. But most importantly, and sad at the same time, that more work is critically needed.
Yep.
So, that being said, folks, listen, don't forget to follow Jar Michael Harris on social media. And while
Mhm.
you're following him, share his information, talk about it, get signed up, volunteer, right? We need help in the field. And while you're following him, make sure you also click the follow button for us too while you're on social media. Might
Absolutely.
as well hit it both, right? I love it.
All
Uh,
right, man.
Jay, I really appreciate it. Thank you again, young man. Don't hang up. I have to end the live.
Okay.
Dude,